Gender stereotypes start young.
Abraham's watching.
In terms of coming from that more reformed background and being in a science as kind of a career now, how do you reconcile your faith with that science? I know like a lot of academic pursuits kind of can sometimes conflict with faith beliefs, or that's the perception that most people have. So how do you kind of break that perception?
I would say the key thing is that term that you're saying, that perception. I think definitely culture has kind of set up this perception that faith and science have to be at odds. And I was getting two kind of versions of Christian culture growing up as a child. So like I mentioned before, I was getting this like literature from Focus on the Family that was in my household, and like there was magazines in my school and in my church, and I was a reader and I read everything. So I read that. And I remember like one of the teen magazines for kids, there was one for boys and one for girls because apparently we're different. The
Yeah.
girls had a lot of makeup tips and the boys had a lot of like action adventure because, okay, gender stereotypes start young.
Yeah, they do, especially in
I read both. Don't tell Focus on the Family.
yeah. I feel like especially like in society in general they start young, but especially in religious groups they tend to start very, very young.
Yes and no. Like I feel like in society you don't have that structure that helps to like reinforce those, because a lot of it comes from structure and community. So you could be involved in social clubs that would also reinforce that.
Yeah,
Like I know people that are involved in like even sports. Sometimes sports can reinforce those stereotypes too.
yeah.
Just like more competitive leagues for boys and more recreational leagues for girls or that sort of thing. Although those things are changing, but I'm like, it's more that like involved in organized society that really helps to reinforce those stereotypes.
That's true. Yeah. Even if you look at like Boy Scouts versus what is it, Clover Buds, or what's the female one? But
Girl Scouts, like brownies.
yeah,
And
the activities that they do are more like craft focused, I think, a lot of the times, at least from my experience with them, it was
so
craft.
my church had their own version. When I started, it was the Calvinist Cadet Corps for the boys and Calvinettes for the girls. Can you tell our main theologian was John Calvin? Anyhow, the girls ministry quickly, like when I was in there, they realized that like this term Calvinettes was not jiving with the girls anymore. Like they just were not getting it, and it also didn't really adequately like represent the ministry. So it's now called GEMS, which is an acronym for Girls Everywhere Meeting the Savior, which is a much better.
Yeah.
Like it can be girls or guys though. Come on, the boys can be gems too. The boys would tease us and call us Jemmy Bears, but anyhow, it was fun. But like the guys, the activities that they would do, like they had like a uniform that was very militaristic, and they had to like recite a pledge to the flag and like all that sort of thing. And then they would do things like welding and woodworking and orienteering and very like intense skills and archery and shooting guns and things like that. And like the girls would do activities like, let's glue feathers onto a pine cone and make like a fall display. And like, let's learn knots. Like our macrame badge was making a macrame wreath, and the guys' macrame badge, or it wasn't called macrame, it was called knot tying, was like learning like clove hitches and all sorts of like knots for sailing and for like actual use.
Yeah.
Useful purposes. I learned how to make a wreath and a planter, hanger, and all sorts of things. So there was definitely a lot of gender stereotyping in that. It's interesting now because I'm involved in that ministry in my church now as a leader. We've changed the program. So like the grade 8 girls, yes, they learn about makeup, but they also learn how to like change a tire and change oil in a car.
Awesome.
And they learn they go and do axe throwing because that's what they want to do.
That's fantastic.
And like they do like a good mix of everything, which I appreciate because I was like, yeah, why
I would have loved that as a kid.
Yeah. And it's pretty fun for them to like they get excited to, go learn how to change oil, and they're like not even allowed to drive yet, but they learn how to change oil in a car and things
Cool.
like that. So it's pretty cool. So those things are changing slowly.
Mhm.
Mostly because people like me who grew up in it are coming and we're like, we want to lead, but we don't want to lead that way.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But yeah, we were talking about faith and science.